Welcome back, everyone, to our coverage of the LEC. Our next matchup is Misfits Gaming versus G2 Esports, and for our reigning champions, the question is if rekkles has given them the renaissance they were looking for. And I'm going to talk about that with my two, I was going to say desk guests, but there's an absence of a desk. So my two guests, Kadril and LS. So LS, talk to me about what you have seen from rekkles and G2 so far, and how you think they've evolved and how they're doing overall.
So I feel like I commented on this earlier on that this iteration of G2 I think is potentially going to have the biggest upside of any Western team ever. Going into Worlds even especially, I mean, I predict that they'll probably end up at Worlds as the first seed from Europe this year. But rekkles, I think he's the best Western AD carry, and now he's on G2. And G2, I think their best version was when Caps was in mid lane and historically Perks in the marksman position. And I think rekkles is just a bigger upgrade. And I feel like the freedom that they're going to have, especially as they continue to grow as a team and whatnot, is just going to be way bigger because this guy is just such an insane player. And he also seems like he's at the peak of his career.
I like the way you put that, because obviously Perks was also a great marksman on that role, but there's a difference between that and someone who's been playing the role lifelong. Kadril, do you agree with the possibilities that that's going to offer to G2, not necessarily immediately, but in the long run?
Especially in the long run, I think. If you think of rekkles, he's been through so many different metas. He's been through years and years of different AD carry changes, hyper carries, playmaking carries, and although Perks did bring a lot of innovation to the team, shot calling and lots of kind of a what-if factor to G2, I think rekkles build brings a lot more consistency and stability to the roster so that the other players can be a bit more careless on what they pick and be a bit more innovative themselves. So I think rekkles is just that late-game insurance that G2 need, where if Caps is behind, he steps up, which I think G2 kind of lacked a little bit last year.
Unless, do you anticipate that we'll see a fundamental change in the way G2 approach games, especially when we get to like the best of fives and whatnot with rekkles now?
Yeah, I think it's actually going to be huge. I think one of the main gripes people might have saying that Perks could have an edge over rekkles in is that Perks could play mages, right? And rekkles, we haven't really seen a whole lot of champion diversity, but I actually got to talk to rekkles on several occasions last summer, and I felt like the narrative that he might be unmoving in his champion pool and other things of this nature, it's just not true. I think he's actually way more open-minded than any public perception gives him credit for. And I think that his champion pool can evolve and grow. And now having the freedom of the 4 teammates that he has on G2 around to give him that comfort to expand might mean that we might see more enchanters, we might see more mages out of rekkles as time continues.
Yeah, and I think what made Perks shine especially was the Worlds 2019 meta when it was Xayah Kai'Sa on the AD carry role. He was really popping off on those champs, but as we saw last year, it wasn't too much of that meta anymore. It's more towards Aphelios, Senna, a little bit of Ezreal and Ashe. So I think that when it came to those champions, rekkles can just be more adaptive and pick them up a lot easier than Perks could.
We'll see indeed what happens in the future. It's looking good so far. Let's talk about Misfits as well, because they unfortunately are a team that is in rapid decline. After good showings in the first week, we haven't really had a lot to write home about with this team. And unless you specifically wanted to look at how they've been drafting for these games and what possibly is going wrong there.
Yeah, I mean, Misfits drafts, they strike me as just really bizarre. If you look at a lot of them, they put a lot of responsibility on themselves in order to get ahead of their opponents early. They opt into this willingly, and it just strikes me as something that's really weird. I mean, you just see the level of early game aggression that they have going on. The one draft that I think that you could say has a little bit more options and versatility in it is the one with Camille, Lilia, Yone, Jhin, and Galio. That one definitely has a lot more forgiveness, has a lot more upside, a lot of mid-game power. But the Olaf Syndra, Zyra Khan, Gnar, champions that aren't really thematically on the same page, puts a lot of onus on them to get ahead of their opponents, and they're not finding advantages. And I also don't know why they would opt into these knife fights with other players in the league.
And I think that if you look at those 3 drafts, every single one of the champions was different in every single role in every single game, which I think is really important. If all of them are playing unique champions, I think they're not really finding a formula to success. Like you look at Schalke, they're just overall good teamfight scaling comps. XL, really hard focus on scaling. And this is what picked them up early wins in the season. And I think that especially for a team like Misfits, you need to find something that works for you, stick to it, and as the season progresses and you pick up these wins, then you can start looking at different ways to play the game, because I think stabilizing yourself early into the spring split is really important, especially if you want to look for playoffs.
So you're saying it's kind of they did the opposite. They first try out a bunch of things that weren't working out, and then actually you have to find the one that works first. But it seems that they do not have the answers as of now. We'll see what happens. This is a chance for Misfits to start the second half of the season on a high note and bring back the magic from week 1. Let's see if it happens.